I didn't even have a chance to pull out my chair before he ended things. The cafe was packed, with soft jazz drifting down from the ceiling speakers and the smell of espresso and overpriced desserts filling the room. I'd barely taken a couple of steps toward the table when Jason lifted his eyes from a cappuccino he hadn't touched and said, "We need to talk." My stomach sank instantly. I can still hear his voice in my head, flat, careful, like he'd practiced the words ahead of time. I sat down anyway, even though my hands were already slick with sweat. "What's going on?" I asked, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "Is this about the caterer?" He didn't answer that. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and set a small velvet box down between us. It wasn't there to give me anything, it was there to take something back. "I can't marry you, Emily," he said. Just like that. 7 words that cut deeper than any scalpel I'd ever held. "What?" I whispered. He leaned back in his chair, like finally telling the truth had lifted some heavy weight off his chest. "It's not you," he said. "It's just that we're going in different directions. I've made connections, important ones. Megan Langley and I are aligned in ways I didn't recognize before." Megan Langley. Gregory Langley's daughter. The venture capitalist who practically owned half the tech startups on the West Coast. My heart started racing. "You're leaving me for her?" "Yes." "It's not like that," he said, even though it was exactly like that. "This is better for both of us. You deserve someone simpler." He didn't flinch when I just stared at him, frozen, trying to understand how the man I was supposed to marry in 16 days could erase me so easily. Then, as if he hadn't already hollowed me out, he added, "And the ring? It's a family heirloom. My grandmother would be devastated if it left the family." I slipped the ring off. My hands were shaking, but I managed it. I placed it carefully on the table between us and said, "Thank you for your honesty." Then I stood up and walked away. I passed through the glass doors, past couples sharing dessert, past curious faces trying to piece together what they'd just witnessed. It wasn't until I turned onto Elm Street that the tears finally came. I didn't go back to the apartment we'd shared. I didn't want to see the half-packed boxes or the wedding dress still hanging in the closet. I couldn't face the quiet. But when I arrived later, it was already finished. My belongings were stacked neatly by the door in labeled suitcases. Toiletries. All sorted with careful precision, like I was being returned to sender. Jason hadn't done that. He never would have been that thoughtful. It had to be his mother. I sat on the floor beside those bags for I don't know how long. My old studio lease had already ended. I'd handed it over to a nursing student a few weeks earlier. Every dollar I'd saved had gone into the wedding. I had less than $100 to my name and a full week to survive until payday. That's when I did something I hadn't done in over a year. Called my foster mom. Margaret Temple picked up on the 3rd ring. Her voice warm and steady like it always was. "Emily, honey, where have you been?" she said. "I was just about to call you about those shoes we looked at last week." I couldn't get a word out. All I managed was a sob. That was enough. An hour later, I was curled up on her faded plaid couch, holding a mug of peppermint tea while she smoothed my hair the way she used to when I was 13 and fresh off yet another foster placement gone wrong. Margaret didn't push for details. She just draped a thick knit blanket over my legs and said, "You stay as long as you need, you hear me? I've got room, and you don't owe anyone a thing." That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake on the old pull-out bed in her living room, staring at the ceiling and replaying every second of that conversation with Jason. His calm tone. The way he never hesitated. I wondered if he'd ever really loved me, or if I'd just been a placeholder until someone with a last name like Langley came along. By sunrise, the sharp pain had dulled into something heavier, something that felt a lot like shame. I was supposed to be stepping into a new life, a fresh chapter, a family of my own. Instead, I was right back where I'd started. 28 years old. Heartbroken. Homeless. Humiliated. At noon, I showered, got dressed, and went back to the hospital like nothing had happened. The nurses smiled. Some asked about the wedding. I smiled back and nodded, lying through my teeth because the truth felt like it would rip me open all over again. But as I changed into my scrubs and checked my patient list, one thing was clear. I couldn't stay here forever. Not in this town. Not surrounded by these memories. Not while Jason Miller and Megan Langley were probably clinking champagne glasses over their perfectly aligned future just across the state line. Not when I had nowhere else to go and nothing left to lose. 3 days passed. 3 slow, aching days where I did my job on autopilot, trying to keep myself from falling apart. I smiled when people asked about the wedding. I said it was postponed. I said Jason had a sudden business trip. I said I was fine. I said way too much. On the 3rd day, while I was checking in 4-line in room 8, Rachel, our blunt no-nonsense charge nurse, poked her head in. "You still looking for a miracle escape from this place?" she asked. I blinked. "What?" She motioned me into the hallway and dropped her voice. "You remember Lily from Neuro? She took a private care gig last month. Live-in great money, but she quit last week. Couldn't handle the guy." "What guy?" asked. Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Some rich tech mogul. Paralyzed. Lives up in Cypress Hill in one of those ridiculous houses you wonder who even builds. Apparently he's a nightmare. Sounds amazing though. Pays triple what we make here. Private suite. Meals included. No roommates. No night shifts. Just one patient." I hesitated. "I'm not a caregiver," I said. "You're a nurse with 5 years under your belt," she shot back. "You're more qualified than half the people they've had. And trust me, this guy scares most of them off in under 2 weeks. You're stubborn. That might actually be your edge." I almost laughed. I wasn't sure what part of me still counted as stubborn. Everything inside me felt cracked wide open. But the word escape stuck with me. It echoed louder than anything else. "Do you have a contact?" I asked. 10 minutes later, she handed me a small card. A name was written on it in sharp, elegant cursive. Margaret Temple. Estate manager. Phone number underneath. Took me until midnight to make the call. I stood in the back alley behind Margaret's house, coat pulled tight, breathing in the cold Montana air while my phone shook in my hand. Margaret Temple answered on the 2nd ring. "Yes, this is Emily Carter," I said quietly. "I was told there might be an opening for a live-in nursing position." There was a pause. Then the voice on the other end asked, "Are you available for an interview tomorrow morning at 9? I blinked, caught off guard. "Yes," I said. "I can be there." "Bring your credentials and references," she replied. "The address will be sent to you shortly. Do not be late." The line went dead. At 4:30 the next morning, I boarded the first flight out of Helena to San Francisco. From there, I transferred to a smaller shuttle that climbed higher and higher into the hills of Cyprus, until it felt like the real world had fallen away behind us. The whole thing felt unreal, like a dream I hadn't done anything to deserve. Then I saw the house. It rose out of the cliffside like a modern fortress, all glass, steel, and sharp angles, fused into the rock as if someone had carved a mansion straight out of sunlight and stone. A long black gate slid open as my cab approached, and for one brief second, I almost told the driver to turn around. But it was already too late. Margaret Temple greeted me at the front door. She was in her 60s, thin as wire, her hair pulled into a tight twist, wearing a dark blue suit without a single crease. She looked me over with the practiced precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime in either the military or a hospital. "You're early," she said. "I didn't want to be late." "Good. Follow me." The interview didn't take long. She skimmed my resume, asked 4 short questions, never smiled, and finally said, "The position is yours, Miss Carter." She folded her hands and continued, "The terms are straightforward. You are on call at all times. 2 days off per month. No visitors. Medical competence is essential. Discretion is non-negotiable. Your patient is a complicated man. You will reside on the 2nd floor, adjacent to his suite. Meals and housing are provided. Compensation is $12,000 per month, with a performance bonus based on the patient's progress." I worked hard not to react. I remember gripping the arms of the chair just to keep myself from laughing out loud. It was more than triple what I made at the hospital. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have anything except an overstuffed duffel bag and a heart that was still bleeding. But I said yes anyway. I said it without a second of hesitation. Margaret slid a folder across the table. "This is your contract," she said. "Review it tonight. Your patient is Mr. Ryan Hale." The name meant nothing to me then. It wouldn't stay that way for long. The next morning, I stood outside his door with the folder tucked under my arm, my heart thudding hard against my ribs. The hallway was silent, muffled by thick carpeting designed to swallow sound. Everything about the house felt sleek and cold. Stone floors, sharp lines, expensive quiet. Margaret stood beside me, a clipboard pressed to her chest. "You're sure you want this?" she asked without turning her head. I signed the contract. "That's not what I asked," she said. I swallowed. "Yes." She knocked twice and opened the door without waiting for permission. The room was massive. Too massive. Vaulted ceilings, glass walls overlooking a stretch of towering redwoods, sunlight spilling across pale hardwood floors. It didn't feel like a bedroom so much as a throne room built for someone who no longer ruled anything. He sat by the window in a sleek black wheelchair, his back to us. "Mr. Hale," Margaret said crisply, "your new nurse has arrived. Emily Carter." He didn't turn right away. His fingers tapped slowly against the armrest. Then he pivoted toward us, and my breath caught. I don't know what I'd expected. Someone older. Someone fragile. But Ryan Hale was young, mid-30s maybe. Tall even while seated. Short dark hair. Sharp jawline. As like cut glass. There was exhaustion in him though. His skin was pale, his frame lean. But it was his expression that warned me. He looked at me like I'd already failed him. "So," he said, his voice low and edged with bite. "They sent me another one." I opened my mouth to respond, but he cut me off. "What's the bet this time, Margaret?" "A week. 10 days. Margaret didn't answer. "I'll leave you two to get acquainted," she said instead, and closed the door behind her. The silence stretched between us. "I'm not here to place bets," I said finally. "I'm here to do my job." He rolled his chair a few feet closer, studying me like a piece of art he'd already decided he didn't like. "And what job do you think that is?" "Medication management. Physical therapy coordination. Monitoring vitals. Supporting rehabilitation," I said evenly. He snorted. "You forgot the part where you nod sympathetically while I failed to walk again. That's usually everyone's favorite." I didn't flinch. "I'm not here to pity you." He tilted his head slightly. "Oh," he said. "That's new. Most of them fall apart by day 3. Maybe I'll surprise you." "Maybe," he said, though the smirk tugging at his mouth made it clear he didn't believe me. The rest of the day passed in stiff, measured silence. I administered his medication, reviewed his therapy plan, and documented everything. Ryan kept throwing sharp comments my way, testing me, pushing for a reaction. I didn't give him one. I'd worked with amputee veterans, teenagers who screamed through every injection, mothers who cried through morphine haze. Ryan Hale wasn't going to scare me off. That evening, while I was organizing his drawers, he spoke again. "You're not what I expected." I glanced up. "No," I said. "And you haven't asked about the accident. I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to." Another pause. Another surprise. "It was a ski trip," he said at last. "Solo. I lost control on a ridge. I woke up in a helicopter. I haven't stood unaided since." He nodded. "Thank you for telling me." He watched me for a long moment. "Why take this job?" he asked. "I needed it." "Not the money," he said. "Why this job?" I met his gaze. "Because I know what it feels like to be lied to. Because I know what it's like to be thrown away." Something shifted in his expression. Just for a second. A crack in a wall that wasn't supposed to exist. Then he turned back toward the window. Don't get attached, he said. I don't do gratitude. And I don't do friendship. Good, I replied. I don't do illusions. He didn't respond, but he didn't dismiss me either. It happened on the 5th night. I wasn't supposed to be awake, but the wind had been howling since midnight, rattling the windows like a restless ghost unsure whether it wanted in or out. I got up to close the blinds and noticed the lights still on in the West Wing gym, an area Ryan rarely allowed anyone to enter alone. First I ignored it. I told myself he'd probably fallen asleep in there with the TV on. But something tugged at me. Something quiet. Instinctive. I pulled on a sweater, moved down the dark hallway, and eased the gym door open just enough to look inside. And what I saw made everything stop. Ryan Hale was standing. Not fully. Not on his own. He was gripping the parallel bars. His arms locked tight with effort, sweat sliding down his temples. His legs shook beneath him, every muscle pulled taut as wire. But he was moving, slowly, deliberately, one painful step at a time. My breath caught. He didn't see me at first. He was too focused, too locked in. But the faint creak of the door betrayed me. He turned, and the look on his face shifted instantly, from strain to fury. "What the hell are you doing?" he snapped. "I heard something," I said. "Get out, Emily. Now." I didn't move. Not because I was frozen, but because something inside my chest had already shifted. He wasn't hopeless. He wasn't done. He was hiding progress. "Why are you keeping this a secret?" I asked quietly. His grip tightened, knuckles bleaching white against the bars. "Because the second people see progress, they start expecting miracles," he said. "That's not how healing works." He let out a bitter laugh. "No, but that is how disappointment works. I've watched people walk away the moment they realized I wasn't going to magically stand up and become who I used to be. I'm not doing that again. So instead," I said, "you pretend there's nothing left. That you've given up." His jaw clenched. "You don't understand." I stepped closer, slow and careful, like approaching an injured animal. "Maybe I do." His eyes locked onto mine, angry, uncertain, searching. "I'm not going to tell anyone," I said. "But if you let me help you, really help you, we can work toward something better. You don't have to do this alone." "Why?" he demanded. "Why do you care?" "Because I know what it feels like to have your future ripped away," I said. "And still be expected to smile through what's left." He stared at me, breathing hard, sweat catching the light on his skin. I braced myself for shouting, for orders to leave, for threats to fire me. Instead, he lowered himself back into the wheelchair, slow and controlled, utterly spent. Finally he muttered, "Fine." My heart jumped. "We keep this between us," he added. No one knows. I understand. And you follow my lead," he said. "I say stop, we stop. I say go, you help. That's it." "Agreed." He studied me for a long moment. His eyes were still sharp, guarded, but something had shifted. Something unspoken. "You're not like the others," he said. Shrugged. "I'm not trying to be." We started the sessions the next morning. Early. Quiet. Before Margaret stirred and before sunlight fully warmed the kitchen tiles. Every step was agony. Controlled. Measured. Like he was fighting gravity with nothing but stubbornness and muscle memory. But he did it. And I was there. Not to cheer. Not to cry. Just to steady him when he wavered and catch him if he fell. Started with a voice. I was organizing the medication cabinet in my room when I heard it. Deep, confident, too smooth. Well, not Ryan. Not anyone from the house staff. Curious, I moved quietly into the hallway and followed the sound to the west sitting room. There, stretched out on the leather couch, was a man in his early 40s. An expensive watch caught the morning light. He held a glass of something that definitely wasn't juice. "Ryan, you look like hell," the man said with a laugh. Ryan, seated across from him, offered a tight smile. "Good to see you too, Eric." That was how I met Eric Thorne, Ryan's longtime business partner. The man Margaret had mentioned. The one who'd taken over running Hale Nexus Technologies after Ryan's accident. Something about him made my skin crawl. Maybe it was the way he looked at Ryan, like he was still calculating his usefulness. Or maybe it was how his eyes lingered on me when I entered with the tea tray. Slow, assessing, invasive. "This the new one?" Eric asked. "Emily Carter," I said evenly as I set the tray down. "She any better than the last three?" he added, sipping his drink. "She's not here to entertain you," Ryan said coolly. "She's my nurse." The conversation drifted into business. Mergers. Investor pressure. Government contracts. I tried to fade into the background. But then I heard a word that stopped me cold. "Langley." Eric leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Laura says her father's ready to push the funds through. We just need the control package transferred to the shell. Langley Capital absorbs it. He's got board contacts. Easy entry." Ryan didn't respond. He stared out the window, his hand clenched tight around the armrest. "I've already prepped the docs," Eric went on. "We just need your signature later." "I'll review the documents," Ryan said flatly. "You've been saying that for weeks," Eric replied. "If we wait much longer, the window closes." Ryan stayed silent. My pulse pounded in my ears. I slipped out of the room before either of them realized I was still there. Langley. Laura Langley. The name still haunted me. Then it clicked. Langley Capital. Laura. Eric pushing for Ryan's signature. They weren't investing. They were taking control. Stripping the company while Ryan was still vulnerable. And if Laura Langley was involved, Megan Langley couldn't be far behind. My chest tightened as I shut my bedroom door. Was this connected to what had happened to me? Was I just collateral damage in something much bigger? Or had I been chosen because I was invisible, the kind of woman no one would ever suspect? That night I couldn't hold it in anymore. While helping Ryan with his stretching exercises, I broke the silence. "There's something I overheard today," I said. "About your company." He didn't look at me. "Go on." I told him everything. Exact phrases. I even mentioned Megan Langley. That made him pause. "You know her?" he asked. "My ex-fiancé left me for her." He blinked slowly. "Jason Miller." He nodded. "You know him?" "No," he said. "But I've heard the name through Eric." He turned his chair toward me, studying my face. "Are you suggesting my business partner and your ex are what? Working together?" "I'm saying it's too much of a coincidence to ignore." He didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, "I'll review the documents." That was all. I tried not to feel crushed. I'd hoped for more belief, urgency, action. Instead, Ryan retreated into silence, like my words had fallen into empty space. That night, I paced my room like a caged animal. Was I wrong? Was I seeing threats where there were none? Or worse, was I right and no one would believe me? The next morning there was a knock at my door. Ryan never knocked. When I opened it, he was sitting in his wheelchair with a folder resting on his lap. "You were right," he said. "Langley Capital isn't just investing. The paperwork transfers ownership and decision-making authority to a holding company Eric created 2 months ago, buried under layers of shell entities." My breath hitched. "I want you to help me stop them," he said, handing me the folder. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "After everything?" Ryan nodded once. "If they think I'm too weak to fight back, then they've forgotten who I was before I broke." The plan took days to shape. Every night, once the house settled and the windows went dark, Ryan and I sat across from each other at the long oak table in the study, buried in documents and strategy notes. Some nights his hands shook from exhaustion, but his voice never wavered. He was building a war room piece by piece. And inside those walls, I was his only ally. He'd already reached out to his attorney. Together they were pulling records, emails, contracts, bank trails, everything. Ryan didn't hide anything from me. Not even the doubts. "I trusted Eric more than anyone," he admitted one night. He was there the day I pitched my first app. I let him speak for me when I couldn't walk. You were right to trust your instincts, I told him. I was late to do that, he said quietly. But I won't be late again. A week later, a special board meeting was scheduled. No one suspected a thing. Ryan let Eric believe the signature was coming. He even thanked him in an email for handling everything so smoothly. That afternoon, Ryan dressed for the meeting. It was the first time I'd seen him in a tailored suit, midnight blue, perfectly cut. He looked powerful in a way that slowed my heartbeat. His body was still fragile, but the way he carried himself, upright, deliberate, shifted the air around him. He practiced walking with his cane. 10 steps, then 15, then 20. I want them to see it, he said. With their own eyes. We arrived 15 minutes early. The building was all glass and chrome and echoing silence. Heads turned as we walked in. Ryan beside me, jaw set, steps careful but steady. Shock rippled through the boardroom. Eric sat at the head of the table. Laura Langley was there too, dressed in dove gray, legs crossed, lips painted like armor. And beside her sat Jason. He looked smaller than I remembered. Still handsome. Still smug. But less polished now, like something borrowed that never quite fit. When Ryan stepped fully into the room, cane in hand, the silence snapped. You're walking, Eric said. Not perfectly, Ryan replied. But enough. He didn't take a seat at the end. He walked straight to the head of the table, stopped, and met Eric's gaze. This meeting is now under my authority, he said calmly. And I'll start with this. He placed the folder down and opened it. Page by page, he laid it all out. Every forged trail, every buried clause, every piece of proof showing Eric's attempt to transfer control of Hale Nexus Technologies to a shell company owned by Langley Capital. Laura didn't flinch. Jason shifted in his chair. Eric's face slowly drained of color. You can't prove intent, Eric muttered. I don't need to, Ryan replied. I only need to prove breach of fiduciary duty. Which I just did. The room stirred. The general counsel stood. Mr. Hale, she said, would you like to call for an immediate vote of no confidence? I would, Ryan replied. Effective immediately. Chaos followed. Laura stood first, her heels striking the floor like gunfire. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Ryan. Oh, I do, he said softly. A woman who hides behind her father's name. And a man willing to sell out everything for a shortcut. She scoffed. And your nurse. What about her? She's my co-founder now, Ryan said. He turned toward me. She's the reason I'm standing here at all. Jason looked away. The vote was called. It was unanimous. Eric was removed. The contracts were voided. Control was restored. When the room finally emptied, Ryan and I were left alone. He leaned on his cane, breathing hard, but his eyes were alive. You did it, I whispered. No, he said. We did. Then for just a moment he smiled wide, real, unguarded. And I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe before then. He wasn't the only one taking his first steps that day. Weeks passed. The mansion no longer felt like a mausoleum. Windows stayed open. Light filled the halls. Even the garden, once dry and forgotten, began to breathe again. Ryan still had hard days. He still limped. He still fought pain. But the bitterness that once followed him everywhere began to loosen its grip. So did mine. I stopped mourning the wedding that never happened. The name I almost took. I let it go. Slowly, I started seeing myself as more than someone who'd been discarded. I read again. I ran short loops on the private trail behind the house. I laughed. I laughed without guilt. Ryan insisted on cooking one night a week. He burned rice. He swore at the stove like it had personally wronged him. Let him. I sat at the kitchen island, legs tucked under me, smiling at his frustration. That became our ritual. Unspoken. But ours. One night. He handed me a dish I couldn't identify and said, "If this kills you, I want it on record." I tasted it. You'll get the company in the will, I deadpanned. He paused. Actually, no. I looked up. I moved it into a trust, he said. One that includes you. I blinked. What? I'm not handing you a company, he said gently. But I built something better with you than I ever did with anyone else. And I want you to be part of what comes next. I stared at him. Ryan. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black box. Before you say anything, he said quickly, you don't have to answer today. Or this year. I know I'm still learning how to be a person again. And I know you didn't sign up for this. He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold ring with a single sapphire set at the center. But I want to ask anyway, he said quietly. Will you consider walking this road with me? Not because I need saving, but because with you, I remember who I am. I didn't cry. I thought I would. Instead, I felt something steadier. Sense of arrival. Like I'd made it through the darkest stretch of the forest and found, not a castle, but a clearing. A quiet place where I could finally breathe. I took the ring and slipped it onto my finger. I'm not saying yes, I whispered with a smile. But I'm not saying no. He laughed. That sounds exactly like you. We didn't rush anything. There were no announcements, no headlines, just more mornings, more healing, more steps forward. He walked half a mile on his. The following month, I passed my certification to open my own private practice. We hired more staff. He stayed in the house, but it no longer felt like his. Felt like ours. As for Jason, he texted once 2 lines asking if I was okay. I never replied. I didn't need to. Because the truth was I'd already gotten everything I was supposed to get from that heartbreak. A lesson, a detour, and a doorway into the life I hadn't even dared to imagine. And Ryan, he stopped using the chair altogether by the fall. On his birthday, we took a short trip up to the coast. Just us. He walked beside me down the beach at sunset, sand clinging to our feet, the wind cold enough to sting. At one point, he looked out over the ocean and said, You think we'll ever go back to who we were before? At all? I shook my head. I hope not. He turned to me and I added, because who we became is better. He didn't respond. He just reached for my hand and didn't let go.